Okay, so let's talk through macros. So that's the next function that we're going to talk about today. And in summary, what macros allow you to do is automate functions without knowing how to program. So there's a way to record macros. And essentially what it does is it records uh, either mouse clicks or scrolling, filtering, whatever you can do within Excel. You can record those sequence of actions and play them back at a later time by activating that macro. So in a sense, it allows you to save a tremendous amount of time of manual operations being converted into a macro code. And so for this, I'll show you a few slides that explain how to get to that function, and then of course I'll go ahead and do a live demo of it. So the first thing you'll notice is that on the formula, the bar here, the title bar, you'll see a function called developer. Okay, so when you click on that, you'll see an icon that's called record macro. So in this case, you'll want to click on that first, and what it does is it lets Excel know that you want to record a series of actions that it will code for you in the macro language, which is, I believe, Visual Basic. So anyways, you go ahead and click the macro record button, and you can record your mouse moves and clicks in subsequent steps. Once you click that record macro icon, it's going to ask you to name the macro. And the reason why it does this is so you can distinguish that macro from other ones that you might record in the same spreadsheet. And also, when you create an icon with a link to a macro, you of course need to know which one to link it to. So you'll name your macro. The one thing I will say is you definitely don't want to put a space in there. It doesn't like spaces. And so a simple macro name with an underscore, if you want to put in a space between letters, is the best practice. After that, you can go ahead and do your recording. So really just do all the manual functions that you would want to record and go through that entire process, just like you were manually manipulating tables in Excel. Once you're done with that, then you would click on the stop recording icon, and that would stop the recording of the macro. Then what you can do is when you go back to the developer tab, you can click on the macros icon here, and then this macro name will come up. You'd select the one that you just recorded, and you can click edit, and then you can edit the actual code. And so what that does is sometimes you'll have extraneous mouse moves or scrolling that you can eliminate from the macro code just to make it run more efficiently. Keep in mind though, even with those items within the code, if it had recorded, say, you scrolling up and down the screen, it doesn't affect the function of the macro. You might see some extraneous movement when the macro is run, but the functionality is still there. So I would say if you're uncomfortable with editing code, you can just go ahead and leave everything in there. So all the steps that you recorded would be within that macro, and it would still work just fine. The other function or feature I wanted to show you is you can create a clip art or icon of any kind. So you can do like the insert clip art, and you can even type when you do that. Searching for an appropriate icon, you can just type in macro, for example, and I'll show you that on the demo. And then you can assign that macro to that icon. And so that's another reason why you want to keep track of the names of your macros. So let's go ahead and see a demo. I think it'll make it a lot more clear as we go through the example. Okay, so here we are within Excel, and you'll notice I've clicked the Scorecard Report Macros tab. And so that's the tab you'll want to click if you are following along with this webinar. So in this situation, we are in the same stage we were at the end of the isError function we just talked about. And so now what we're going to do is to showcase macros. And so in this situation, let's say that we have a VLOOKUP table that's operating properly. You'll notice we got rid of all the error codes that we had before. And so here it is, right? But it's not exactly in the format that we would want to present to a customer. So we'd want to get rid of some of these spaces. And what if we also wanted to alphabetize the ID numbers so that they can see them in sequence, right? In addition, there's another thing that we would need to do is, you'll remember that this particular table has formulas in it. So if we provided this table to a customer, there is a risk that they could accidentally modify that formula or even delete it, just in case they decided, well, hey, I want to reset this table. They'll delete these formulas, and now the table will not work anymore, right? We've deleted all the formulas, all the VLOOKUP functions. And so typically when I develop an application, this table with the formulas would be working in the background, and then the end user would only see a formatted table with only the information, no formulas. So there's many ways to do that, but the easiest way you can do it is actually by making a macro that copies this information here in this table, puts it in a formatted table, and that could be on a completely different tab, for example. It'll put that formatted table on that tab, and now the end user is referenced to that tab, and they just see the data in the correct format, and there's no way they could accidentally modify the formulas that helped create that report. So let's go ahead and make a macro. So I'm going to click on the Developer tab, and I'm going to record a macro. So it's going to ask me for what the name will be. So I'll just say demo ASQ, for example, right? So I'm going to click OK there. So now I'm actually recording the macro. So whatever I do is going to be recorded into code. So I'm actually going to put in some extraneous motion as well, so you'll see what that looks like in the actual macro code. So let's go ahead and do exactly what we would normally do. I'm going to highlight these cells, and I'm going to go ahead and copy. So I'll go back to home, I'll say copy, and I'm going to paste it in the formatted table. So I'm going to scroll down, and I'm going to click on the first cell that I want to paste, and of course it will paste the rest of them because this whole entire table is highlighted. But there's something I wanted to show you. You definitely don't want to just paste this information here by using just the paste command, because what that's going to do is it's going to copy the formulas onto this table. We don't want that, right? So there's a function that you'll need to use which is called paste special, right? So you'll click on paste special, and you'll want to do two things. You can paste values, right? And then you'll also want to paste special formats. So just in case there's a format in some other tables or it might bold a certain entry, you want that also represented in this data table. So the one thing you'll notice is that now each cell does not have a formula. It just has the information, right? And I'm going to put in some extraneous motion here. I'm going to scroll down and scroll back up just for the heck of it, because I will then show you how that's represented in the macro code. So say in addition to just copying the data, I want to format it. So I can go ahead and highlight the title row, and I can go to data and do filter function, right? And so what I can do there is it highlights this row, and now we have pull down menu, so I can pull down and say, well, let me get rid of blanks. So it's going to get rid of all the blanks, and then I can say, well, you know what I also want to do is to put these AV numbers in order. So I can click on that again, and let's say sort A to Z. So now all this information is sorted, it's in the appropriate format. Then I could say, well, yes, I am done recording, so I'll go up to the Developer tab, and I'll click Stop Recording. So now let's see what we've recorded just by doing that short process. I can go back up to the macros icon, and then here's my demo ASQ macro that I had named and then just recorded. So if I click on edit, I'm going to see here the code for that macro. And you can identify a lot of extraneous code by, for example, this active window scroll row. That's typically just extraneous, because remember I kind of scrolled up and down on the screen. We don't need that, so you can delete that. These are all standard code, and it's needed here. Let's see if we can find any additional things here. No, pretty much everything else is valid. So, oh, here's another scroll down. Oh, here it is. Yeah, we'll just get rid of that one too. I just saw that one. Let's go ahead and do that. And so we've cleaned it up as much as we can. And you can, if you learn this code, you'll be able to see even some other ways to make it more efficient. But in this case, let's say we're satisfied with that. We'll go ahead and get out of that edit screen. So now, let's go ahead and do something. Let's go ahead and we'll reset this table. I'll take the blanks out, and let's go ahead and just delete this table. So now here's where we started from before. Oh, let me just unfilter this as well. So now here, this is exactly what it looked like before, right? And you remember all the steps we went to through to combine or to copy this onto this formatted table. Well, that's been recorded onto a macro, right? And so what I can do now is I can go to Developer, Macro, Demo ASQ, and hit Run. And now all that process is now automatically been done through that macro, and now here's the end result. So it saves us a lot of steps because we've recorded that macro. And now when we revise this data, so for example, if I were to go column 3 now, I'm going to do the supplier name again. Column 3. Now we have the supplier name being showed here, remember. So let's run that macro again. So we can go Developer, Macro, run this macro, and there it is, right? So now it's updated that table again. Another thing I wanted to show you is how you can assign the macro to clip art. So this is a standard clip art. So I'll make another one. Let's say insert clip art, and we'll just say happy face. Happy face. So let's see if we have a happy. Oh, there's a happy face. Let's do that one, right? So we'll do a happy face, and we can shrink him down a little bit. There it is, right? Happy face. So let's assign that macro to this happy face. So I'm going to right-click that and say Assign Macro, right? And let's assign it to that Demo ASQ macro, and we'll test it, right? So we'll X out of that. Let's say we want city and state, column 4, right? There it is. Okay, let's click on the happy face because now it's associated with that macro we just created, and there we go, right? So now it's reformatted this table, and so now whenever I want to run the macro, I don't have to go to the developer macro. I just, I can go ahead and change. So let's go back to supplier name again, then click on the happy face. So it saves a lot of time. You can have multiple macros running, so you can have 5, 6, 7, however many macros you want to do, and have each one associated with an icon. So you can imagine you can make a dashboard screen with different icons, say in a menu, make it nice and graphical, and just click on the ones you need and run different functions as you need them. So it's a very powerful way to do repetitive functions automatically, and it also makes it a lot easier for the end user who might not be familiar with developer macro and choosing that macro title, right? You just create a menu for them, put icons on it, and that's all they have to know. They click the icon that they need, and boom, the analysis is complete. So I hope that's a little clearer on how macros work, and I think you'll find them very, very helpful.